So, Bill, lovely to see you again, and welcome back, listeners, to episode 3 of What is Reality? So, today, Bill and I are going to talk about a topic that is prevalent, I think, for many of us, and quite close to my heart. And Bill, I'm sure you've came across this too, but it's around our life journey, and really a lot of us struggle to be present in the moment, and we kind of think joy and happiness lies somewhere in the future. So we always think, when I get here, or what, when my business reaches X point, I'll be happy. When I have a house and I'm married and I have kids, I'll be happy. Or when I secure that promotion. I think we all suffer from this: when when X happens, I will be happy. And I think today I really wanted to kind of uncover and explore, like, the pain and the difficulty that we have in that, because I know a lot of us know in our rational brains that isn't true, but we struggle with it. So Bill, I mean, what's your take on this topic area? I know that it's something we've talked about in our past conversations.
Well, you're right. I agree that if people were totally rational and didn't have emotions and intuitions, and other kinds of feelings that are amorphous going on inside of us, if we were just like AIs or robots, that we could do everything in a perfectly logical, sane way, and if we were in that state of consciousness, that mindset, we would say to ourselves, do I like being happy? Do I really enjoy it? Am I just paying lip service, or is it really fun to be happy? Do I really prefer to be happy, or do I like to be moody and melancholy? No, I really do prefer to be happy. Then why do I set up conditions? Why do I restrict myself to not being allowed to feel happy unless certain conditions are fulfilled? Outcomes which may lie minutes in the future, or years, or decades in the future. Why would I postpone my happiness if it's something I really care about? Maybe I don't care about it. Maybe that's it. So, but we're not perfectly rational. So we don't think that way, at least most of the time. Most of us, most of the time, feel like we have no control over that. That the emotions that we feel, like happiness and sadness, somehow have their own control over themselves and over us, and we have to go with that. We're victimized by it, or we don't even think that clearly to use the word victimized. We just know emotional experiences are powerful and uncontrollable, that they overtake us, and they determine our feelings. But therein lies the real opportunity, because as the Stoics in 400 BC concluded, that if they really focus their minds, they can control their emotions. They can control their emotional reactions. So that was a long time ago, when the human race, at least some people, for some period of time, came to that realization. Now, the Stoics lived their philosophy. Their philosophy was, if I can change something to make it better, I should do that. If I can't change something, like I'm in a war and I didn't pick the fight, but here we are in a war, I have to accept that as a reality. I don't like it. I don't want it, but it's here and I have to deal with it. So if it's causing me negative emotion, that's actually weakening me. And so I'll lose the war. So I don't want that to happen. And if I'm just in fear of that happening, that's going to bring it on. It's going to bring on the thing I fear. So they realized all of this, and they said, make a separation between what you can control and what you can't control. Like, make a list of the things that are bugging you, and then break them down into, what part of this do I have some control over? which is typically what you can control is your own reaction. So in my books, I recommend when you reach that point in the thought process, you can start by acting the way you want to actually be inside. It may seem false, but it's actually a step towards having the self-mastery be true inside is, act like you're cool, calm, and collected. Even though inside you may be a little scared, showing it is just going to make it worse. So don't show it. And then you'll find that it's just like a smile. If you're in a bad mood and you smile, all of a sudden you find you're in a better mood. Even though, so you forced the smile, you knew you weren't in a good mood, but the smile somehow brings on a good mood. So in the same way, acting out is not necessarily a bad thing. It's a step along the way. It isn't being false necessarily. It's being true to your aspirational self. It's being true to the self you want to be. So it isn't false. It's only false to the current self that you are, which is inflicted by these ego, vanity, defensive, coping positions that are essentially like coming from behind, assuming the worst. But they're hidden assumptions. You don't realize you're assuming the worst. But the whole ego's thing is all about assuming the worst and trying to combat those things that you're assuming are going to happen because you're not worthy.
Yeah, so it's almost like people have desires, they have wants, and visions of how they foresee their life going, and they think that they think that they want that, right? But there's something obviously inside of them like causing this unhappiness. And I think what you said there is around, there's some kind of element there that maybe believes that it's not going to happen, and this is why the unhappiness comes in, right? Because there's almost a fear that what they want is not going to happen, and with that they're actually showing up as if it's not going to happen, maybe not consciously, but they are showing up in a way that that's what they're projecting out. And then by proxy, that is the reality that they create, right? And you said there about shifting your focus on what you can control and what you can't. And I think that's a really powerful thing. And I know for me, I remember the moment when I realized that you have to shift everything into what you can control. But I do think, and this is maybe where the lines blur a little bit, and perhaps you can talk to this too, but there's almost like a circle of control, but then there's like a circle of influence, I think, around that. It's not maybe necessarily down to you, but you can influence it in a certain way. And then there's the things that are out of your control completely, like what's getting shown on the news, or certain political agendas and things like that. But what is your thoughts on, I guess, talking about those different circles, about what you can control and then what you can influence?
I think that's an important distinction. And of course, there are no black and white demarcation lines in the mind. Everything's a gray scale. So it's good to always have that perspective that there isn't a clear line of what you control, that it kind of fades out into semi-control, influence, as you put it. And it also, that sphere of what you're able to control or influence expands and contracts. It's not always the same. If you're on a path to self-mastery, self-understanding, and to be able to see more of what's going on inside of yourself so that you can bring it under the control of yourself by seeing, look, I always say that. Why do I always say that thing that it's actually demeaning myself? I always say it like it's habitual. Why am I doing that? That kind of a self-discovery leads to, of course, it's hard to break a habit. So the habit gradually disappears from your life as you continuously catch it. You catch it earlier and earlier in the process until finally you're not demeaning yourself and given the example. And in general, this whole process of paying attention internally as much as externally all the time, that recommended process will expand your sphere of control and influence.
Mm.
So you'll be able to influence things more. One thing we can't control is what's already happened in the past.
Mm.
And so the most unjustifiable wallowing in negativity is wallowing in negativity over something that's happened already. It happened, you can't go back and change that. Maybe thousands of years in the future we'll have time travel and everybody will have like we have a smartphone, we'll have a time travel button on the smartphone and we'll go back and fix it. And that'll be great. But until then, the most important, easy place to start is what's about my past is still bringing me down. Every now and then I still get flashes of guilt about something I did in my childhood.
Mm.
And so now I've learned to laugh at that.
Mm-hmm.
and to see the humor in me writing all these books about what you should and shouldn't do. And here I'm having flashes of guilt about stuff that, and the way you process it so that it doesn't hurt anymore and so that you can laugh about it is to realize that although it was terrible that you did that, you hurt your parents' feelings, whatever it was, that you learned from that and it made you who you are today. And if you hadn't done that bad thing then, you might not have learned that thing as well. And so pain and learning often go together.
Mm.
And if we knew everything, if we were omniscient, we would see that they always go together, that the pain, that the universe wouldn't be having any pain happen in any of its appendages like us, except for a good reason, like to spare worse pain in the future. Take a little pain now and learn from it. And that's why it's happening. That's why all the pain is happening. That's my philosophy. So it's a whole separate point from what we were just talking about. But from the perspective of my philosophy, there's a reason why we have pain, and that philosophy helps me not feel pain about the past, but to take the pain from the past every time it arises as a clue to something I could be doing better now in the present and future, as if that memory came up not just to bother me, but to remind me of that lesson, because it in some way applies to this current situation. And so I meditate on it until I see the connection to something that's going on now. And then I feel terrific. And I apply the thing and it always works. And so that even when we do have pain about things that we can't control that happened in the past, there's a purpose to it and we can get good out of it by not just repressing it and not just beating ourselves up for being stupid about something we can't control, but saying maybe there's a reason why it's bubbling up in my mind now. What if I inspect the possible current application of what I learned by having done such an awful thing back then?
Yeah, I think that's that point about, the past. And a lot of us, we cause our own suffering, I think. And it is through that guilt, right? It's guilt of, actions taken or words said or things that we wish. And I think we look back retrospectively with a new perspective or almost a new sense of like clarity, right? Because through that pain, as you said, it comes learning, right? So we look back with a new sense of clarity or a new pair of glasses on, and you almost go, and this is where the guilt comes in, because you have a new perspective or a greater sense of what you would do. So now you're looking at it. I always talk about like life as a game, right? And perhaps back then you were on level 10 and now you're on level like 15, right? And you're looking back on level 15 going, well, of course the door was over there. Why didn't I see it? And I think this is where the guilt almost comes in, because we beat ourselves up a little bit about, like, why couldn't I see the door was there? It's so obvious. And I think, as you said, it's a useful reframe when you feel guilt from the past. It's almost like you did the best you could on the level of the game you were at that point in time, right? So it's and with that comes a sense of peace, I think. It might be a process, but have you learned from it? And I always say this, my mom always said to me, even as a kid, as long as you learn, Natalie, it's not time wasted. And I think as we move through life or move through the levels, as we learn, we get a greater clarity and a almost like a new perspective. So if you feel some guilt or some embarrassment or some shame about what you've done in the past, actually, could you take that as a good thing, that actually you've grown and you're maybe on a new level of the game?
I agree completely. And, to get back to your original point about enjoying life now, I think that with the right mindset, the right mental framework, even people who have never practiced observing their own inner workings, people who are just what I call emergency oversimplification procedure, they're just dealing with all of this stuff that's going on, and they don't have time. They think they don't have time to contemplate, who am I really? What is really going on? What is reality? But instead, there's just all this turbulence of keeping up with all of the stimuli coming at them. They have jobs. Sometimes nowadays it's common for people to have multiple jobs in order to make ends meet. And then they've got families to take care of, and older ones to be caretakers for. And all of this stuff is life today. That's what it is. And it's so much going on. Now we've got these screens, like 90% of waking hours, we've got some kind of screen that we're looking at. 90% of waking hours. And the screens are, generally speaking, I mean, whether it's television or internet, with internet, it's so much happening. It's like more than a three-ring circus. It's more like an infinite ring circus. It's just so much going on. And the mind is attracted to all of that and paying attention to it to some degree. So attention is frayed and diffused across so many different things. You can't get it all together to get into the flow state, let alone the flow state of ecstasy. There are flow states of performance and then flow states of ecstasy and flow states at a spiritual level. So again, it's not sharp lines of demarcation, but grayscale, gradual gradations. So in this modern situation, people aren't having fun. It isn't all fun, but it's supposed to be fun. The universe is doing it for fun and for learning, for fun and for learning, and growth, and it is an art form. The universe is like the supreme art form for the supreme artist, which is the self in each of us. So there's only one of us, and we're all, in this unbelievable arcade Hall of Mirrors universe together. And we're all connected, and we're really all one person. And this should be a ball. There's no reason we should add displeasure to it. And if you look closely, that's what we're doing. If we would just say, okay, let's just clear my mind for a second, clear my mind, clear my emotions, clear my heart, clear it all out. Stop, just stop. we're going to start over again. I'm going to open my eyes. I'm going to look around. I'm going to actually look at what's around me here. Oh, there's a beautiful face right in front of me on a screen. Oh, and there's some beautiful trees in the background. And there's a beautiful cats on this other screen here. I'm surrounded by beauty.
Mm-hmm.
Well, that's good. Let's see. I think I had some work I had to do. Well, what do I really have to do? What is there one strategic thing that I really feel like doing? I got all these little things I have to do. I'm going to do that thing.
Mm-hmm.
This is a really important thing, and I'm drawn to doing it. And I haven't been paying attention to my desire to do it. Now I'm going to do it. I mean, that's the way life should be. It should be, what do I feel like doing? Not what do I have to do? No, you can't stop deadlines from being given to you by employers or clients or by the government or whatever it is. There are certain things you've got to do, but they're probably a small proportion of the things you think you got to do. And, and if you just relax a little bit, it'll all feel better. And the one thing we don't want to do is wallow in negativity, because it just hurts. It brings about the thing we're negative about. If we're negative about fear of not achieving XYZ, as you said before, it just makes it more likely that that feared thing is going to, all of this is self-fulfilling prophecy. It's all self-fulfilling prophecy. If we are in our gut prophesying failure, even at the top of our minds, we're making affirmations constantly, like we've got the mantra going in our heads, and we're doing everything right according to the rituals that we've been taught by gurus who are telling us to do the right thing, and they're well-intentioned and their methods work too. But if you're only doing them at the surface level of your mind, but deep down inside, you still expect to fail, you're going to bring it on yourself. So negativity is not to be encouraged.
So you said fun, learning, and growth. Those are the key reasons that we're here, right? And I agree. I also think that we make things harder than it needs to be. I think we take life quite seriously. Like, I need to show up as this, serious business person that is, takes everything super serious, that you can be professional without being serious. I think there's a difference. And I think if we were all to lighten up a bit, and I think it's asking the question that you said, what do you really need to do like, if you take just like literally a minute saying, what do I really need to do today? Because as you say, when you're in this minutia of I've got this client deadline, I have to take my kids to school, I have to phone this family member, I have to send that email. When we're in that moment, we almost kind of create our own suffering and make it worse for ourselves, because we think we need to do all these things. But is the world going to stop? Like, probably not. And what is the worst that can happen? So I think, again, I feel like I always say this, but it's just taking a moment to ask yourself, like, what do I really need to do today? Like, what do I need to do? And it was interesting, as you said, if I was to take a step back, close my eyes, and open them up as if I was seeing everything for the first time. I just saw a friend actually a couple of days ago with a brand new baby, 2 months old, and she was talking about how we went outside, and she went outside with a little baby and just lay him on the grass, like on a blanket, right? And she could just watch him for hours because he was fascinated by her face, the mum, right? Like, also like the trees in the background and like the wind going through them, and then even just like the smells, the grass, like everything to this newborn baby is like fascinating, right? And and as you were speaking there, like somewhere along the line, and I think this is where kids are our biggest teachers, and like, actually, yeah, it's so powerful that we can learn so much from children. But it's like the curiosity and the inquisitiveness that children have just about nothing. I know my niece, who is 5, right, going on 6, she'll look at leaves and pick those up and be fascinated by a leaf or a pebble or whatever it is. And I think, obviously as adults, we lose that somewhere along the way. But I think that curiosity of a child is something that actually would help people be more fulfilled along the journey and enjoying the journey more than thinking I need to get X, Y, and Z. Applying that same level of, or doesn't need to be the same as a 2-month-old baby, but some level of curiosity. Like, can you get curious about your day, about your week, about the person that you're talking to? I think that would bring another level of depth, to people's interactions.
Getting back to that child's eye view, the naked eye, the really naked eye, stripped of all of the layers of our perceptual expectation conditioning, where we see things, or even our perceptions are distorted by these overlays that we built on the child's mind that we used to be. This maps directly to what I called in my last blog the superfluous superstructure that we build on top of the core essence of our being. The thing that's permanent about us that we will bring into the next life is the core essence of our being, and that's what the child is in those years before the superstructure gets built. And that's what clouds us, is the superstructure. The superstructure, the ego, the protector, the self-protector, the self-defender, the defensive part of our reaction formation that Freud called the ego. All of that stuff is actually neurons in the brain that we built from proteins that we ate. And the specific associations between those neurons are the ego, the things that we fear, the things we don't understand, the things we've put aside or repressed, the things that we're vain about, that we don't want to share with others about ourselves, that we feel aren't projecting ourselves in the right way. We want to put on a persona, a mask, to appear to others to be something that we don't believe we really are. We want to put on a false face because we know inside we're really not good enough. And all of that superstructure, the core essence, never had any doubts that it wasn't good enough. That thought never entered its mind. It was all about curiosity and playfulness, caring, and just a sense of this is all wonderful and thank you and gratitude. And this is all so interesting. And this, wow, this is great. That's who we really are, is that ball of pure feelings that has no negativity in it. But then we build all this other stuff around it, and it's all rationalized, within civilization. We've got to have discipline. We've got to go to school. We've got to learn these values. Well, those values were inherent when we came out of the womb, and while we were in the womb, we already had ethics and morality and compassion. It was built in. We don't really need to be taught that stuff. It just needs to be not clouded over with layers and layers of essentially inflicting guilt. That we're not perfect enough. We're not good enough. There's more. We have to do work on ourselves because we're not good enough. We really just have to get back to where we were when we started.
Yeah. And I mean, for me, if I was somebody listening, if you were listening to this, it's knowing that you have, and this is the whole premise of coaching, right? That every person is resourceful, powerful, and whole, and nobody needs fixing, right? And it's exactly what you're saying. The core or the essence of you is already there, right? And it's just about rediscovering it. And that's, again, it leans into coaching, right? And that is essentially what we're doing there, and the way the TTM, it's all about digging down into, I'm almost imagining like, like almost like a globe kind of circle, right? If you imagine, and then there's all this stuff on the outer circles, but in the core, like you are there, and it's about expanding that core, right? So but we need to dig down to it. And I think that's really important. So for anyone listening that is struggling to like enjoy the journey and thinks that happiness, or even if they deep down know like happiness isn't at a future point or a future destination when they get a certain house or a certain job, like I hope that they can take some peace from knowing that everything they need is inside of themselves already.
Meditation, of course, the whole point of meditation is to quiet the superstructure, and then one realizes oneself, the core, and then feels this joy, and sometimes sees light, and just feels love around them and permeating through them, and they're connected, they're part of the love. I just by quieting the stuff that got built by, it wasn't intentionally built to screw us up. Nobody's at fault for how it's all gone down. This is just what the experience is on this planet, of a race that got super smart, super fast, and is progressing at blinding speed compared to the geological gradualness of all the other stuff that happened on Earth until the last 200,000 years, when we became Homo sapiens. And in the last, particularly 7,000 years, since we started writing, the acceleration rate has been unbelievable. And where it is today, it's racing ahead so quickly that we all sense that we're like in a speeding freight train. and the brakeman took a vacation, and the brake is broken. I'm holding it in my hand. It's not connected anymore. There's nothing. What are we going to do? So that's not anybody's fault. It's a very interesting lesson plan from the universe, to be trying this experiment here. And we're the ones who are getting to do it. It's kind of like a privilege to be in such a weird world. I bet the other worlds are, pretty dull compared to this one. There's a lot of challenges here. If you love a challenge, come to this world.
Yeah. Yeah, definitely. I think, in my mind now, there's just a really strong visual around, people's cores, and we all have one, and it's about expanding that. So and it kind of leads into the authenticity piece, because when we talk about being authentic, it's talking about showing up as your core self, right? And, what is your core, and then expanding that, right? So in terms of, you talked at the beginning about our circle of control and our circle of influence, and that expands based on that expands based on the work that we do on ourselves, and I see that as almost, the more we expand our core, the more we expand our circle of control and influence. So just almost kind of second guessing what somebody who's listening's question would be next is, how did you I guess, one, find or understand your core, and secondly, then how did you expand on it? So is there anything from your story that others could learn or try for themselves?
Well, I was very lucky because I was pushed beyond my limits when I was 4 years old. My limits were, I had unbearable stage fright, and I was in no way attracted to being up on stage. It wasn't part of my plan. I didn't get that idea. But people I trusted said, we don't ask that much of you, Bill. We give you much more freedom than other children have. We respect your opinion on things, even though you're 4 years old. We have rational conversations together. But you got to do this for us. Just trust us. Please, do this for us. So how can I say no? So unbearable stage fright, fine. I get up on stage. I do this over and over and over again, keep performing. Eventually, I experience this out of body. All of a sudden, I'm giving a perfect performance, but I'm observing it happen. It's not like me doing it. I'm floating in this space above my head, behind my body, looking down on me, the blinding light, the spotlight. You can't really see the audience. You can see the first couple of rows a little bit. I'm looking at the scene, and here's Billy giving this great performance. And I'm enjoying this more as a spectator than anything else, but I'm really enjoying this. What is this? This never happened to me before. What's going on? So I had this provocation to investigate myself. What's going on in here? Can I possibly live that way all the time? How would that work? How would I get there? So that became like an obsession. And so people, my parents would put me to bed at whatever time it was appropriate. And I would lay there with my eyes closed, pretending to be sleeping, but my mind would be going a mile a minute. And I didn't get much sleep, but I made a lot of progress in metacognition and, watching my mind work. And, there's a feeling that's interesting. Like feelings and thoughts and images and perceptions and intuitions, all this stuff happens so fast. We don't try to pay attention to it because it seems impossible. But I managed to make it possible. But it was mostly in those times that I was either in bed or in my room alone, staring at a wall or something. And, to people who might be looking in on me, they might think that I'm, on the spectrum, perhaps, or totally catatonic, or, in some kind of a bad situation. But actually, I was contemplating and meditating and thinking, and I certainly learned the power of concentration. So the two things that led me to where I am were introspection and concentration, combining those two things to be able to look inside and actually concentrate while doing that. I had to do that because my goal was to achieve the ability to reproduce. Well, I didn't have a name for it even. I don't know. I can't remember how I referred to it, but I didn't have a word for it. It was just that stuff that happens occasionally. And now I call it the flow state. And other people call it the zone, but whatever you want to call it, it's now neuroscience science. Now it's being recognized by neuroscientists at Yale, at every university. There's no denying that there is a state called flow state. And what we know about it is there's a hypofrontality. In other words, the frontal part of the brain is not as active as it is in the rest of our daily routine. The front part of our brain takes an active role in lots of stuff that we do. But in the flow state, it takes a back seat to the cerebellum and to other parts of the brain that are doing something that we have done so often before that we really know how to do it. And letting the conscious mind stay out of it is helpful. The flow state is kind of doing itself. So what I'm saying is that this isn't woo. This is neuroscience. I didn't know that. I mean, we as a species didn't know that in the 1970s.
Mm.
We began to get glimmerings of it in the 80s and 90s. And, here we are in 2024. And now neuroscience has got a whole, probably 10,000 papers have been written on the subject at this point, all over the world. And it's still being studied continuously. We're learning things every day. So it wasn't just a little kid in bed imagining something and making something up. I was experiencing something scientifically real that is going to be easier for people in the future because science is going to be behind it. And that gives us permission. Because, when you look at the culture that we live in, the most pervasive religion in our culture is science. We do believe in science. More of us believe in science than believe in God. However, there are some people, tens of millions of them, who have become anti-scientific.
Mm.
And that's an interesting phenomenon in itself. And it's part of the general chaos, of the acceleritis of the culture that's created by these genius minds that we've got. And the genius is in the mind, and the brain is supposed to help the genius. And unfortunately, the way things turned out, the brain is, in some cases, not helping the genius. If this superfluous part of the superstructure is not helpful. So now we've got like an inner challenge and an inner enemy, an inner saboteur, a turncoat inside. But it isn't a turncoat because it never had an evil purpose. It's just trying to keep up. It's trying to give everything its due. It may not put enough emphasis on certain things, and it may put too much emphasis on things that are feeding the superfluous part of the self. But that's why we're here. That's why you and I are talking about this stuff, so other people can kind of get the knack of how do they expand their core essence.
Yeah, so really it's introspection, you said, that was vital for you, and I can relate to that as well. Introspection, concentration, but also the delineation between when you in like are introspective, you'll hear different voices. So you can call it the superfluous self, or you and your core. You could call it the angel and the devil. You could call it the monkey on your shoulder, whatever you want to call it. But having that introspection is vital and necessary. You have to be able to concentrate and focus. So whether that's, I know for me during the pandemic, it was going for walks, whether it's you're saying as a child, you're kind of in your bedroom, spending a lot of time alone. So that concentration piece, or whatever you need to be introspective, but then being able to pay attention between what is your core, what is truly you, and what is this sub-self or this devil on your shoulder. And I think like getting inquisitive, and this is where it almost kind of comes a bit full circle. It's about getting curious, right? We talked about children being curious, and we talked about being curious with others, but actually being curious with yourself. And I think you can do that through a number of ways, like asking yourself questions, like asking, is it true, is a really powerful question. I find a lot in coaching, coaches will come with their thoughts and they'll say something, and then, you'll just ask, is it true? And I think that's a really powerful question that people can ask themselves as well, to help, understand their core, but then expand it. What do you think, if people are able to follow this, in terms of introspection, concentration, and like curiosity with oneself, what do you think the impact will be for them as individuals with their core, and then even greater than that, humanity as a whole?
Well, that they'll be able, a lot of children have a problem, well recognized by educators and parents, of distinguishing between the impulses they should follow and the impulses they shouldn't follow. And you just described the way they can do that, that discernment of the voices in my mind. This voice just said something to me. Is it true? And where's this coming from in me? Is this part of my core essence? Is this something that's been overlaid, maybe conditioned into me? In other words, if I have an impulse now to sneer at somebody, where's that coming from? Is that from my core essence? Or is that sneering a kind of a prejudicial reaction that I've been somehow taught to give to people like that, whatever that is in the current situation, people who aren't on my side because either my parents or the kids on the block didn't consider that kind of person to be part of our team, part of our group. They're not invited in. So I'm having this impulse to sneer at somebody. Where did it come from? It probably came from the kids on the street. So do I really just want to mirror the consensus reality that they seem to believe in? It's like a little subculture. That can't be true of me, because when I'm with my family, we're not like that. My family doesn't sneer at people like that. It's the kids on the street who sneer. Do I really want to just be a robot and follow what they do? Well, why don't I just do that when I'm with them, okay? But when I'm not with them, I don't have to act that way. And maybe someday I'll even have the feeling when I'm with them and they act that way to say, something inside of me tells me I don't want to feel that way. And maybe I'm not ready to tell that to the kids on the street yet, but I can see myself getting there someday.
Yeah. And it loops us quite nicely back to like enjoying the journey, right? So, thinking of, I don't know, just even, friends, family, colleagues, anybody, whether you're looking for that promotion, you're looking to get, you want to find a boyfriend, you like wanting kids, you are, I don't know, wanting to retire, or whatever it is. I don't think there's anything wrong with like wanting those things. Right, but we talked about how to understand, like, is it your core self that wants it, and then how do you expand that out? But I think what you said there about your reactions to it, because I think some people maybe want things because that's what society has told, right? It's like, I really want this promotion, or like, I really want this promotion, and like, yeah, like I really want it, and here are all the reasons that I want it. And like, but actually, is it because you're just embarrassed to say to somebody else, like, oh, I've been in this job 5 years and I've not got promoted yet? So it's that, like, what is the reaction that you want to have, right? And how can you bring more of your true self out in that moment? So, maybe you're just happy in your role, and maybe you're actually like okay with it, and that you're fine. Like, are you comfortable with where you're at in your life? And if you are, like, own it, like, just own it, because then you allow others to do the same. And if you're not truly happy, then change it. I really think, that's the two pieces for me. Like, understand where you are in your journey. If you're not happy, like, well, if you are happy, own it. And if you're not happy, change it. And for me, that is how you get to a point of like enjoying the journey.
I think that's wise, definitely wise, and something that anybody can understand. That and will many people will be surprised when they realize that they're actually happy where they are, and the promotion might be something they want because the status, prestige, more money, all of those things are good. The family will be happy, the kids will be impressed. Those are all fine, but there might also be a feeling of there's some uncertainty. Am I ready for that job? Will I enjoy that job? Is that job going to be as much fun as this job? And am I having as much fun as I could have in this job? Like if I assume for a second I'll get promoted or I won't get promoted, whatever they decide to do, uh, I'll I'll make the most of it either way. And I'll start right now by really enjoying this job that I'm in and making sure that I'm doing the full job. Like maybe I've been holding myself back all these years to do all the things I could do from this particular job. Like, am I doing the best possible version of this job? As long as I still have this job, let me make it a magnum opus move now to really blow out this job to the maximum positive effect it can have on the company. And maybe that'll help me get the promotion, but that's not the point. The point is, let's make the most of this job while I have it, because I don't want to have to look back and say, well, there were several things I could have done in that job that I didn't do. And maybe I'm not going to be in this job much longer. I better get down to it and make this job total fulfillment.
Mhm. Yeah. It goes back to the fun, learning and growth, right? That the reasons that we're here. So in this moment, can you have fun? Are you learning and are you growing? Right. And I think everything else outside of that, you can't control other people, but you can control who you surround yourself with. You can control who you let into your life. So if you can focus on you and ask yourself, are you have fun? Are you learning? And are you growing? You'll probably find that you are happy in the moment. And I think that's about embodying. When we started this conversation today, it was about how do you get to enjoy the journey. I think through our conversation today, we've kind of made the point that you can be happy now. And I think for anybody that's listening, it's about embodying that. And what can you do today to start embodying that?
Beautiful.
Well, Bill, thank you so much for another magnificent episode of What is Reality. And we hope that, dear listeners, you have learned something today and that you can leave this podcast having fun, learning and growing with us. So we hope to see you again soon. Bye.
Bye.